Hello there. It's me, Harry, again. I hope you had a pleasant day and are now ready to once more dive into the story of the last train again with me. The story did not end when the train vanished. In truth, it had only just begun. For all the silence surrounding the mission, someone had to design the mechanisms that would make the disappearance permanent. No whispered order or sealed crate could have accomplished what was needed without infrastructure, the kind built not in weeks, but across years of quiet preparation. The Reese complex, hidden in the dense fir forests of Lower Silesia, was already a ghost of its original ambition. Conceived as an underground fortress, its network of tunnels had been blasted, drilled, and reinforced by the hands of thousands, most of whom never saw daylight again. It was in these half-finished vaults that the idea for a hidden railway began to take shape. Not as an evacuation route, but as a vault, a terminal with no departure, a graveyard for history. Zone 4 was selected for its geological profile. Granite-rich, naturally insulated and with minimal groundwater penetration, it was perfect for permanent concealment. The tunnel ran deep into the hillside, its original purpose unknown, even to those who built it. But a small team of planners and engineers began repurposing it, quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention. The work began with falsified documents. Quarry operations were expanded on paper to explain the movement of trucks, materials, and fuel. Civilian engineers were conscripted under unrelated industrial projects. Their true work orders never left the site. A transport corridor was cut into the existing tunnel system, retrofitted with narrow-gauge track imported in secret from a Czechoslovakian mining operation. Everything was done by hand. No welders, no torchwork, just bolts, clamps, and sweat. To preserve secrecy, each worker only knew their own section. Only the master planners saw the full layout. Men like Otto Wiesner, a former professor of subterranean engineering, who vanished from the university rolls in 1943. Wiesner was said to be obsessed with silence. He spoke only in diagrams. According to one surviving page from his notes, he believed that sound was the enemy of secrecy, and built mechanisms accordingly. Rubber-sleeved rail joints, sponge-lined service hatches, and gravel-padded equipment housing. The lighting system was primitive but precise. Red-capped lanterns hung from ceiling hooks, spaced at 20-meter intervals. All could be extinguished simultaneously from a single control panel, hidden in an alcove behind the third ventilation shaft. The design was brilliant in its simplicity. Everything was modular, collapsible, and, when needed, erasable. The train would enter through one end, the wall behind it would close, and the entrance would cease to exist. Not a hiding place, a rebirth. And once it was sealed, only 4 men in the world would know how it had been done. None of them ever spoke of it again. Now about the men behind the machine. No machine builds itself. No tunnel seals its own mouth. Behind every quiet mechanism there are hands, rough, calloused, and often forgotten. The men who built the system were not soldiers. They wore no insignia, held no rank. Their loyalties were not to ideology, but to precision. Most came from industries dissolved by war: bridge makers, elevator specialists, cable riggers. They arrived at the Reese site under aliases or forged papers. Their families told they had been reassigned to safer posts. Among them was Emil Markovich, a Polish engineer with experience in subterranean ventilation. He had spent a decade building coal tunnels near Katowice. One winter morning in 1945, he was taken from his apartment without explanation. He resurfaced in Silesia weeks later, assigned to Infrastructure Support B. Markovich was not trusted, but he was needed, and so he worked under constant watch. Later, in a single surviving letter, he wrote, "We are building a box inside the earth. It has no lock, only secrets." Another was Hans Graeber, a mechanical fitter from Dresden. He had once installed elevators in government buildings. At Riese, he helped suspend an entire segment of track on counterbalanced platforms. The idea, if anyone entered the tunnel incorrectly, the train bed would collapse, trapping both Gold and intruder. He never saw the final system deployed. He died during a test drop. Each man worked in isolation. They were given no sense of purpose. Materials arrived without explanation. When questions were asked, answers came in gestures or silence. Their only constant companion was the rhythm of machinery, pulleys, hand drills, and the occasional echo of boots on stone. Some left behind fragments, notes, scraps, even markings etched into tool handles. One such handle, discovered in the 1980s during an exploratory dig, bore the initials JM and a carved phrase in Czech: "We built a tomb, and they left us inside." The youngest among them was Karl Tannhauser, barely 18, drafted from a vocational school for industrial metals. He kept a journal, carefully hidden in the sole of his boot. The entries began with observations, but quickly turned to questions. Where does it go? Why the silence? Are we the last to see this? His final note, dated April 26, 1945, reads, "Tomorrow they test the full run. We are to remain out of sight. We are told we'll be relocated after. I do not think we will." He was never seen again. In the final days of the operation, many of these men were gathered under the pretense of transfer. Trucks arrived, no one returned. Their names did not appear on transport rosters. The war ended, but for them, it had already vanished into the tunnels they helped create. It is said that the best systems hide not just what they contain, but also who built them. In this, the train's protectors succeeded. Their stories were sealed in concrete and smoke. What remains are only shadows and scratched initials in stone. To hide a train is to hide a movement, a mass, and a memory. It is to erase weight from the world. The concealment systems built around Transport 44B were not improvisations. They were designed with intent, layered and deliberate. Not to merely disguise the site, but to confuse the very idea that it had existed at all. The entrance to the tunnel was masked first. From the outside it resembled a natural rock face, complete with aged lichen, grafted from nearby surfaces, and soot-stained stonework recovered from dismantled cottages. Optical illusions were employed. Curved shadows, false depth, angled trees planted deliberately to mislead the eye. Above the tunnel mouth, vegetation was disturbed and replanted to appear older. Moss was scraped from riverbanks and applied by hand to concrete. Fallen logs were embedded in trenches. Their root systems extended with wire and paint to mimic age. Soundproofing was critical. Foam-lined access panels were buried within earthen berms. Any generator or internal combustion noise was funneled into vertical shafts, lined with charcoal and wool. Primitive, but effective. When the engine started, no sound carried beyond 20 meters. Camouflage extended beyond the immediate site. Decoy tunnels were built and partially collapsed. Dummy equipment was left rusting in clear view. A fake operations map seeded with errors was planted inside a captured document pouch and lost during a controlled skirmish. The train itself bore no markings. Its cars were covered in black canvas, stenciled with phony serial numbers. Beneath them, the chassis had been painted with thermal dampening compounds, an experimental mixture designed to mislead infrared detection, though its true efficacy remains uncertain. Even the rail path leading to the tunnel was erased. After the train entered, the approach was detonated in segments. Trees were felled across the line. Tracks were torn up, then stacked and left to rust. Surveyors, years later, found fragments of rail embedded in stone and assumed it had been a wartime quarry spur. A final measure was psychological. Local villagers were relocated under vague claims of disease control. Flyers were posted warning of land instability. Rumours were seeded that the tunnels were haunted. One SS captain even dressed in rags and wandered nearby hills at night, spreading stories of cave collapses and ghosts to deter looters. No system is perfect, but this one came close. When Allied teams combed the area months later, they found only debris, false trails, and collapsed caverns. None ever reported seeing rails, and none suspected a train had passed through. By the time nature had reclaimed the slope, not even birds flew near it. Whatever lay beneath, it no longer disturbed the forest above. The final day began like any other. Fog along the treetops, frost in the earth, and silence in the valley. But beneath the surface everything was already in motion. The shutdown had been rehearsed weeks in advance. It involved not just the train, but the entire ecosystem built around it. Every entrance, every shaft, every false door had its place in the sequence. Failure at one point would risk unraveling the illusion. At 3:47 a.m., the internal generator was shut down. This marked the point of no return. From that moment forward, no electric light would illuminate the tunnel. Only lanterns, then eventually none at all. The fuel stores were drained and ignited. The fire burned without smoke, a carefully controlled chemical reaction producing only heat. Any trace of the depot, rubber hoses, storage drums, power leads, was reduced to ash within hours. Secondary tunnels were collapsed in a chain. Timed charges placed over weeks and concealed beneath soil and timber sealed them in sequence. As each chamber folded in on itself, dust filtered through the main shaft like breath from a dying body. The engineers responsible for these demolitions were the last to leave. Most were never identified. One was said to have stayed behind to ensure detonation. His name has since become legend. The man who sealed the mountain from inside. Above-ground camouflage was finalized. Trees felled weeks earlier were dragged back over the new rubble. Stones were replaced by hand. Water diverted into shallow basins to create the illusion of natural erosion. A final photograph was taken, grainy, distant, and monochrome. It shows only trees and a broken path, but in the lower corner, barely visible, is a straight line, the edge of a rail buried under soil. No monument was built. No orders were written. The operation existed only in memory. Memories that would not be passed down. 3 men were debriefed in a hunting lodge 2 valleys away. Each was given a coded phrase and a forged identity. One fled to Argentina, one to Switzerland. The third disappeared from all records after 1950. The Allied forces never found the train. Soviet scouts roamed nearby forests, but were redirected. American intelligence reports mentioned the Rees complex, but underestimated its scale. Files were misfiled, names misspelled, maps mislabeled, and so the mountain kept its silence. For decades it stood untouched, the concrete deep inside aging slowly, dust settling like a second skin across the last known location of Transport 44B. In later years, rumours returned. Locals whispered of engines heard underfoot, of warm air rising through winter frost, of lights beneath the roots, but no proof was found, no entrance recovered, because the truth had been buried, not just in rock but in ritual, in the deliberate, patient erasure of movement, of evidence, of memory itself. What they built was not simply a hiding place. It was an ending, not of war, but of witness. And in that ending the silence continues. That's our today's part. I hope you sleep well, and as always, until we meet again, be all right and take care. Have a good night. Bye.